Hello there, and welcome to Successfully Depressed, and I'm your host, Kerry. This show is all about helping solopreneurs navigate mental and physical health in life and business. Today's guest is Andrea Niles, PhD. She is the CEO and founder of Prospera Mental Health and Wellness, a leader in providing high-quality, affordable mental health care. Andrea completed her PhD at UCLA, the top clinical psychology program in the United States. She trained as a therapist, and her career has focused on improving effectiveness of and access to evidence-based therapies for anxiety and depression. Welcome to the show, Andrea Niles.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I want to know more about your background. And when I came across you, I think it was on LinkedIn, I found a little bit more information about you, dug a little bit further, and I found that was interesting that you're studying cognitive behavioral therapy, something I want to learn more about. So can you kind of tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today?
Sure, yeah. So as you mentioned, I've been studying treatments for anxiety and depression for a very long time, both as a scientist and as a therapist. So I know about as much as a person can know about these disorders and their treatments, but there was one question that I would get often, could be at, a party or a family gathering, somebody asking me, can you recommend a good, affordable therapist? I have a sister or friend or whoever, or myself who's struggling with panic attacks or anxiety or depression. And I always hated that question because I just didn't have a good answer. I didn't know where to guide people. And so, I can answer lots of questions about the science, about the research, but that question I couldn't answer. And that's really probably one of the most important questions that people would ask me is like, how do I actually get this help? And so that's why I decided to found Prospera. Okay.
And then what was kind of the education that you went through to get you where you are now? I know you've worked at a different company prior to Prospera as well.
Yeah, so I would say, all of my graduate training up until now is really, really relevant to what I've been doing. So, learning about treatments, how they work, who they work for, actually applying that in practice with, hundreds and hundreds of patients. Then I was in academia and doing that kind of work. And then I went into industry and I worked for 3 years for a digital mental health company called Uper, where I wrote content for our app. And that content was very much based on all of the work and my research and everything that I had learned and trained in my graduate training. And so I was then taking that knowledge and applying it. And that app was used by hundreds of thousands of people. And we were able to really see how people were engaging with it and how it was helpful and understand, how different people at different times of day with different problems might respond to different types of interventions inside the app.
Okay. And so now that we have a little understanding of kind of your background and kind of what you're doing now, I'd like to learn a little bit more about what is cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah. And this is a great question, really, really important for anybody to know who's a consumer of therapy is, what is CBT? So based on the scientific research, it's the most effective and most researched treatment approach for a wide variety of mental health conditions. So it's based on this model, the cognitive behavioral model, where thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are all linked together. So thoughts drive emotions, emotions drive behaviors, behaviors then drive different emotions and different thoughts, and it's this kind of cycle. And so if we can work to change thoughts and behaviors and patterns that are happening in those things, then we ultimately can change how we're feeling. And this model applies across all different kinds of problems that people have. And so in cognitive behavioral therapy, you're working to understand thinking and behavior patterns, and then learning skills and strategies of how to change those patterns.
Okay, yeah, I know it was something that's newer to me. There's so many different tools and tactics and thoughts on improving mental health. And so I'm glad that we're able to talk about this today. The next thing I have a question about, what is the difference between CBT and, let's say, regular therapy?
Yeah, so CBT is therapy. So sometimes people say, CBT is different from therapy. So CBT is a particular type of therapy, and there's lots of different approaches to therapy, but I would say most commonly what you're going to get when you meet with the majority of therapists is probably just talk therapy, where you come in and they say, how was your week? And then that kind of drives the whole conversation. So you're just talking, and they might be using different strategies or techniques to drive the conversation in different ways, or having interesting reflections on what you're talking about. But it's a little bit more sort of supportive and is kind of driven by what's happening from one week to the next. And that tends to be less helpful than an approach that's more structured and focused, where you set specific goals and then you work towards those goals and you check in and you're trying to basically actually make changes in what you're doing now, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis in terms of how you respond to your emotions. And that approach tends to be more effective than just having a supportive person, which is really wonderful. But you can add something on top of that support with learning new strategies and skills and techniques.
Yeah, I like that idea, because I know for myself and like a lot of people, it's like if you read a book and you didn't take notes or really thought about it, then you forget everything about it. Just like if you're in therapy and you don't maybe have something to take with you that week or that day to really think about, it still is very helpful, but then you don't find the true underlying meaning, what's causing your issues, and kind of work on to improve it. So I think for a lot of people, just having that structure is probably a very helpful thing.
Yeah, and something that I'll often say, the patterns and behaviors that you're engaging in today have been things that you've been doing for years and years and years. And so the idea that you can come in and talk to me for 50 minutes once a week and make changes is not really realistic. And so it does require, taking what we talk about in session and going into your life and practicing it and putting into action, and then bringing it back to me in the session and talking about how that went and what didn't work, and okay, let's see what where we can troubleshoot this. And so and we do know that the more work people do between session, the better effects they see from the therapy. So I do think that additional sort of outside work and practice with skills is really critical.
Yeah, there's no magic pill or one time that fixes it all. It's something you've been doing for most of your life, your whole life. That kind of leads me into the next question. So it's my understanding that CBT treatment usually involves efforts to change thinking patterns. What are some of the strategies where we can put this into action?
Yeah, so So first I'll say that there are definitely kind of self-help resources and books and things that will lead people through this themselves, but I can kind of walk through what this might look like. So when the first step to trying to change how you think about something, you need to be aware of those thoughts. And our thoughts happen so fast, and they're often outside of our awareness, and all we notice is the emotion. Oh, I'm so anxious today. I just feel awful. I'm so anxious. But there's thoughts that are driving that. There's always thoughts that are driving that emotion that you're experiencing. So the first step is to start to take a step back when you feel that emotion and identify what are the thoughts that are driving that emotion. So are you worried about your work, your performance at work? Maybe your boss said something and that is making you think, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to continue my job. Maybe I'm going to get fired. And you're thinking about that. And of course, then you feel anxious, but you may not realize that that's actually what you're thinking about. So you first become aware of those thoughts. And then from there, you're going to look for whether there are what are called distortions. We also call them thinking traps in those thoughts. So are there things that you're thinking that actually aren't really consistent with the evidence? So we can go with that example with your boss. So maybe your boss had, said one thing, but what are you hearing on your sort of official progress meetings, or what have you heard over the last week, even about your performance from your boss or from your colleagues? And so you're looking for whether you might be kind of misconstruing what's happening. And then the last step from there is to actually look for evidence. And this is kind of an objective process where you're saying, okay, what is the evidence that I have that my boss is not happy with my performance, and what is the evidence I have that my boss is happy with my performance? And so you're trying to sort of be an objective scientist and look for the actual evidence. And then from there, you can come up with what's called a more balanced thought, sort of taking all of the evidence into account.
Okay, that makes sense. And leading into the next question, how do patients and therapists work together using CBT?
Yeah, this is a good question, because I think sometimes people think that CBT is kind of this cookie cutter thing, and you just go in and the therapist would say the same thing to every patient, and that could not be farther from the truth. It's very personalized. It's very collaborative. And so usually what you're doing is you're working as a therapist, you're working with the patient to figure out what kinds of tools help that particular person, and how can we apply these tools to that particular person's issues or challenges. And I have certainly had patients where, I try one type of thing like cognitive restructuring, and it just doesn't work. There's various reasons that it's not working for them. And so we try something different. We try a different approach. And so it is collaborative. It is personalized. It's definitely not this kind of cookie cutter, sort of one size fits all approach.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people just think that everything is that cookie cutter approach, to fix things, and it just doesn't really work that. And I know for me personally, it's like you mentioned earlier, you really have to put the work in on whatever you're doing, whether it's even beyond just working on yourself, just work. You just have to have a focused schedule and put your work in. And when you do that, then things usually work out pretty well for you. Now that we have a better understanding of what CBT is, and how to practice it, let's switch the conversation to the time you're working at UPR, where you drove the effort behind UPR's now published scientific paper that showed how mobile apps can effectively reduce anxiety and depression symptoms. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, and this is where I think technology can play a major role in helping get more people access to the incredible tools that CBT provides. And so when I was there, our app was designed to help walk people through the process of learning tools to respond differently to their emotion. And so I was taking everything that I knew from my training and experience and what you might do when you're sitting in a room with a patient in a 50-minute session, and then trying to translate that into an app. And our app is a chat bot. And so basically you're chatting with this automated individual. And so I was writing the content, what that entity, I guess we'll say this entity was saying, to walk somebody through the process of regulating and managing how they were feeling and changing how they were feeling. And so that was really fun to be able to kind of take what I knew and then translate it and write it in a totally different context. And yeah, people really, really liked what we had, what we were doing, the way we were doing it with the chat. They found it very engaging, very, very helpful to, in that moment when they're feeling, really overwhelmed by emotion, to be able to pick up the app and talk to this robot and have the robot walk them through, okay, let's figure out how we can respond to how you're feeling right now to get you feeling better.
Yeah, and that must have been quite the interesting process to kind of script out all these answers, where you're basically writing out a script, talking to yourself really, and how this could work. And but yeah, technology. There's a lot of great things about technology. Especially if it's used in the right way, and it's something that's structured and it has science base behind it to help us out. I might have answered this question earlier when we were talking, but what was your aha moment when you said, this is the time, it makes sense for me to start this new business, Prospera?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I had been working on the app for a few years, and then we decided to bring on coaches to work alongside the app. And so I led that program while I was at UPR, designing the program, figuring out what kind of coaches we were going to bring on and how we would train them. The coaches would provide cognitive behavioral therapy alongside our app. So I worked on that for a little while, and then I felt like the app we had really designed to be kind of a standalone tool. And what I was finding was that when people were coming and wanting to work with the coaches, they really wanted to work with the coaches. So they were, they liked the app well enough, but they were really excited about the coaches, and the app was kind of a a tool to support the coaching. And so it made sense for me to leave at that point and say, you know what, I'm going to do this in a way of thinking about the coaching first. What is the coaching program, and how can we use technology to then support the coaches in providing high quality cognitive behavioral therapy?
The nice thing is, before you started this company, you've already had experience in a startup company and kind of helping them grow. So you kind of got that experience to help you with this, and maybe not make some of the mistakes that were made before, or learn from that and take that to your new company. Do you have any examples of things that maybe you learned while you were at the last company, now you're like, I'm not going to do that this time?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think having that experience is extremely valuable. I would say maybe the thing that I'm going to focus on, that I think we didn't focus on as much there, was, how can we really talk about what we're doing here, get the word out, and that's, talking with people like yourself and trying to really communicate about what it is and what our approach is and why we're doing it, and really make those connections with people, with the community. I think we spent a lot of time and effort and energy working on the app and making it, better and better and better, but we didn't do enough talking and communicating about what we were doing and why it was so awesome. And so I think that ended up leaving us at a place where not enough people really knew about what it was that we were doing.
Well, it's hard. I can definitely relate to that. My experience, when I had my startup company, you're just in the trenches, and there's only so much you can do in a day, and you kind of are just in your own little world, and in your mind, this makes sense to me, but then getting that out to other people and trying to tell people about something, especially like what you're doing, it's a new and disruptive type concept, it takes even more time to kind of educate the people on everything. So I think what's good, you've learned from the past experience, but what I like about your company is that I think, no question, we need one-on-one conversations with real people, and now what we learned during the pandemic, that it's just more common and expensive to talk to people like we're right now, talking to people virtually, but then to add the tools and the science behind it and the research behind it, you kind of get a little bit of the best of all worlds combined. So let's kind of go more into now to talk a little bit more about your business and what it all entails and how it differs from other mental health platforms out there.
Yeah, and so I'm really glad that we spent some time talking about cognitive behavioral therapy and what it is, because our mission really is around high quality care that draws from the most up-to-date scientific evidence. And so our goal is to get everybody access to these tools and these strategies that we know are effective, and to do it at a very low cost. And we use this model of mental health coaches combined with our digital tools library. And then we have licensed therapists who work behind the scenes and support our coaches, so to make sure that everything they're doing is of the highest quality and that they're delivering really, really good care. And this is different from the existing companies for a few reasons. So there are a number of really large companies who are trying to increase access, and they've done a nice job at that. But I think they've really struggled with the cost piece, because they tend to use licensed providers, and those providers deserve to be paid a lot of money because they've gone through years and years of training, rigorous exams to get their degrees and to get their licensure. And so I think they're always struggling with the challenge of trying to keep the cost down while also really supporting their providers. So that's one way that I think our model is a little bit better in terms of the actual cost of what we can provide. But also our sole focus on evidence-based treatments is really different from what other people are doing. And so they bring on their providers, and those providers will provide whatever treatment approach they know how to do and they're trained in, but they may not be trained in cognitive behavioral therapy. And so that's our kind of niche, is providing that type of care, which in my perspective, anybody who's trying therapy should always start with that, because that has the highest likelihood of having a positive effect.
Okay, that's great. And in understanding your program, your coaches have at least a psychology degree, and they're often trained to become like a licensed therapist and so on. So, kind of walk me through, if I was a customer of your service, like how it works.
Sure. Yeah. So we've tried to remove all the barriers to getting started with mental health care. So I know how hard it is to even just make the decision to start looking for someone, never mind actually, finding someone and sort of getting yourself moving. There's these internal barriers, and then you have all the external barriers and challenges. So we've tried to remove everything and make it really easy. So if somebody is looking to try therapy or try mental health coaching with Prospera, they can come to our website and you just click Get Started. There's some questions to assess fit and to make sure that you're eligible for the services that we provide. And then from there, you can sign up and you can schedule a meeting with a coach. You can get to that point in less than 5 minutes.
Okay, that's great. And I believe it was $39 a week?
Mm-hmm. Yep. $39 a week per session.
And those sessions are 25 minutes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sessions are 25 minutes. And that subscription also gives you access to our tools library. It has dozens of different kinds of tools to help with all different challenges that somebody might be facing.
So then the coach will work with you, and would they perhaps suggest different tools to use and then kind of follow up on, hey, how did that tool work? Did you do that particular exercise?
Exactly right. Yep. So the coaches will lead you through a program that is designed specifically for whatever it is that you're coming in with, whether it's social anxiety, anxiety and worry, depression, and then they have a set of tools that we know are most helpful for whatever issue that you're facing, and then they'll make a suggestion of a tool to try. They send it right to you. You have your own kind of account, and you'll see the assignment from your coach there each week. You can go through and do your assignment, and then the coach will check in and you actually walk through what you did together with the coach, troubleshoot, figure out what makes sense to keep working on that or try something different for the next week. And so they'll work with you collaboratively alongside that tools library.
Yeah, and you gave me an access to your account. And I appreciate that, so I can kind of play around with it and try it out myself. And one of the exercises or tools that you recommended for me to try is Reframe Anxious Thoughts. And so I went ahead and checked that out, and it said basically, here's my notes. The process had me identify my emotions, answer some questions about the situations that made me feel that way, and then brainstorm ways to change my thoughts. And then my results are actually emailed to me for my own reference, which I like that. So you kind of go through this process, you answer these different questions to kind of think about it. And then I think it's nice to have it emailed to you so that you can look at it again later, because again, even in doing this type of exercise, you got to kind of have to re-look at it and kind of rethink about it often. So I thought what was interesting about this particular process, it's, basically it says, first you identify your primary emotion, then basically you're looking at the situation that made me feel that way, initial thoughts about the situation, your thinking traps, ways you challenge your thought, and then any new thoughts that are, if they're applicable to the situation. So can you maybe, like, as an example, kind of talk about this particular exercise and maybe go into a little more detail on it?
Sure, yeah. So from some of the data that we had at UPER, I know that this particular thing, reframing your thoughts, is the tool that people find most beneficial for reducing their emotion, their negative emotion. And it's kind of the foundation of cognitive therapy. This approach has been around for years and years and years. So so we can go through an example. We'll go with public speaking, because that's one that people are often afraid of. And so if you're feeling anxious about an upcoming talk, then you might look at your thoughts. So the first thing you'll do is say, okay, what thoughts am I having about this? Common thoughts might be something like, I'm going to make a mistake. People are going to think I sound stupid. They're not going to like what I'm saying, what I have to say. So you write down those thoughts, and then from there you look at whether there might be some cognitive distortions in that or thinking traps. Maybe you are focusing only on the negatives of that situation. You're fortune telling, so you're predicting that people are going to say this or think this without having any evidence of that. Mind reading, so you're reading somebody's mind about what they're going to be thinking about what you're saying.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. And so the exercise would walk you through this list of different cognitive distortions, and you try to figure out whether you have any of those in your thoughts. And then from there, you might look for evidence. So, what evidence do I have that people are going to think I'm stupid? Well, it's actually mostly my friends and colleagues, and I know that they actually have a lot of respect for me. So it seems probably unlikely that they're actually going to come away from this thinking that I'm stupid. And actually, my boss was the one who asked me to give this talk. And so it sounds like they're maybe really actually interested in this topic and want to hear from me on it. So you kind of look for evidence. And then from there, you might come up with a more balanced thought that, could be something like, well, my talk is probably not going to be perfect. I may stumble over my words once or twice, but that doesn't mean that people are going to think I'm stupid. And in fact, people actually have told me they're excited about what I have to say. So you kind of combine, you try to come with a balanced thought. It's not as simple as like, everything will be fine. That's not how you do it. You actually want to say, well, yeah, I can make mistakes, but that also doesn't mean that it's going to be catastrophic.
Yeah, you need to be realistic. And it seems like something like that would be good to kind of write those thoughts out and kind of get them out of your head to kind of put them into reality, saying, most of these thoughts are ludicrous, really. These are just thoughts for some reason that you're just conveying based on your emotion. I like the idea of, again, putting the tool into practice. And I think that's really important to have systems in place. And what I like about your tools is that you have tools and then you also have coaches. So you're going back and forth between only using tools by yourself and not really knowing what am I even doing with these tools, but then you have guidance along the way and you actually have someone to talk to so you can practice these tools and see how they can help you. Yeah,
I think that's the piece that is really, really important, because I think people can do these things, totally on their own. We see a lot of people able to do that, but sometimes people don't quite know the best way of doing it. And so that example I gave of maybe the balanced thought that you write is everything's going to be fine. Well, that's actually not the most effective way to use cognitive restructuring. And your coach will spot that and they'll say, okay, so everything's going to be fine. What evidence do you have for that? Let's elaborate on that, right? So they'll prompt you to do this skill in the most effective way. And there are lots of places in that kind of skill where people might do something that's not going to be quite as helpful, and so that coach guiding you and helping kind of move you in the right direction is really valuable.
Yeah, and I think there's a great place for coaching because a lot of us have coaches at some point, whether it was for a sport or it could be an executive coach. Sometimes you just need a sounding board to bounce ideas off of and kind of get things out of your head. And instead of, like, for me, I know my wife she's very supportive, but it's good for me to talk to other people too, not just heard about different things. So I like the idea of that. And did you just launch this, was it in July of this year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just opened to everybody in the US in mid-July. So we're very, very new.
Well, that's the huge accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thank you.
From going from, a concept to creation. A lot of people have an idea, but a lot of them don't execute. So it's exciting to have the execution. And as a fellow solopreneur, tools like this can help us, monitor our ups and downs and things like that. So, is there anything coming up that you're really excited about, maybe in your roadmap, or maybe you're doing a talk somewhere, whatever? Do you have anything really excited that's coming up for you in the next, 6 months or something?
Yeah, so I'm really excited to continue to build out our platform from, the digital side. We have, some great tools now, but there's so many different kinds of tools that we could use to be able to support people with all different kinds of challenges coming into our program. And so I'm excited to build out our program and maybe have specific tracks for people who are, have experienced trauma, having relationship difficulties, and having tools that are really, really tailored and designed for those particular issues. Of course, always stemming from the science, what has been shown to be most helpful for this particular thing that somebody has faced in their life.
Yeah, and again, I want to thank you for coming up with something to make it a affordable process for people dealing with mental health, because there are more things now than there used to be, but there still need to be more things that are developed with science-based research, and then just the stigma, helping break the stigma and getting this out there to people. So I definitely appreciate that, having these lower cost options, which lowers the barrier of entry to help improve people's situation. So again, I want to thank you for your time today. I'm just wondering, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so if you are interested in giving it a try, you can just head to our website. It's prosperamhw.com. And from there, it's pretty easy to get started. You just click on, get started, schedule a session, and that will walk you through the steps there and take you through to the point where you can actually schedule your first session. And you can try it out and see if it works for you. And yeah, that's it.
Well, that's great. In the show notes, we'll have links to your website and information about you. And again, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for telling us about CBT, what it is, the different tools associated with it, and then how your company has been leveraging this into the technology world.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really, really fun to be here.
Thank you. And I always like to end the show with, remember, you are not alone in life or business.